I'm going to call this meeting to order. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 15th meeting of the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, and we are reaching the third or fourth week of our study into the effectiveness of the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises, OSME, and the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program. And further to that study, we have witnesses today in person from the Virtual Marine Technology Incorporated, Captain Anthony Patterson, the President and Chief Executive Officer. Good afternoon, Captain Patterson. And by video conference from Edmonton, Alberta, we'd like to welcome Jeff Hayward, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Data Gardens. Welcome, Mr. Hayward. Can you hear us in Edmonton?
Yes, I can.
Oh, very good. Then this will work just fine. We're asked the witnesses then to make their brief presentations that they've prepared, and then we'll open it to questions. So we'll ask you to begin, Captain Patterson from Virtual Marine Technology Incorporated.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd just like to have my opening remarks. We'll just give a quick description of VMT and our experience with the CICP program. Virtual Marine Technology is Canada's largest marine simulation company. We enable our customers to implement enhanced, immersive, safe, and cost-effective training environments, mainly to improve safety on board ships and offshore structures. We were established in 2004 as a spin-out company from National Research Council and Memorial University of Newfoundland, and we hold the exclusive worldwide licenses to commercialize small craft training technology from those two organizations. We are a small business in that we are less than 50 people. We are privately held, incorporated under the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, with a branch office in Victoria, British Columbia. And our primary market is the offshore oil and gas industry, with secondary markets in shipping and defense. Our experience with government to date is that we've had great support from the federal government on our innovation agenda. The federal government co-invested with the oil and gas industry in Newfoundland to develop the types of technologies that we're bringing to market. We've also had great support from the federal government for marketing of our technologies, particularly through OGGO and Department of Foreign Affairs and the Trade Commissioner's Office. However, we've been unable to sell products directly to the federal government, primarily because a company like ours, relatively small with new technologies, we normally get screened out on risk assessment criteria, either financial or technical risk. In our view, CICP is the only practical way for the federal government to procure new innovations like the ones that we have from us. Our experience with CICP is that the particular project that we are offering is to improve the training for small, high-speed craft operators. So, for instance, people often operate search and rescue craft or law enforcement. The scope is to evaluate the effectiveness of our new product in meeting return on investment criteria. And the department that picked up our technology was the Canadian Coast Guard, and it will be deployed in Bamfield at their training school there. For the good parts of the CICP is the online application was a great innovation. I think you should do more of that. The staff has been very helpful, and the bid and negotiation process was typical for a government procurement, so there was no shortcuts. This was a full-on procurement with the federal government. The things that we see as being improvements for CICP is that there is no contract extension capability within the procurement vehicle. We actually had 3 divisions of the federal government wanted to procure our technology. Once we selected one, it blocked the other 2. And if we're not careful on how you structure your program with CICP, it can bar you from future procurement opportunities with the federal government. In conclusion, I'd say the CICP is a great program. It's an essential but missing part of the spectrum of Canada's innovation strategy. We're very good at innovating things, but we're not great at bringing them to market. This program, I think, will help that. I would say that the CICP program needs to be made bigger. Perhaps things like IRB set-asides could fund portions of the something like the CICP program. You need to enable departments to buy more units under the same procurement vehicle if the trials prove to be successful. And I think the program scope needs to be expanded to include the purchase of early-stage products instead of prototypes. And I would leave that as my opening remarks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much, Captain Patterson. I hope during the question period we learn a little bit more about what virtual marine technology actually does and some of the difficulties you may have had in marketing your product to your own government. If we could hear then from Mr. Jeff Hayward from Data Gardens in Edmonton. Mr. Hayward, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the Standing Committee. I'd like to tell you a little bit first about our company, Data Gardens. Some of my observations about the challenges faced by ICT companies in Western Canada and more broadly in Canada, how CICP plays a role in addressing those challenges, some of our particular experiences through the CICP program, and finally some of the benefits and costs to us as a company in participating. First, to tell you a little bit about Data Gardens as a corporation, we were founded in September of 2007. What we've done is something we feel is quite remarkable, and we've been fortunate to receive international recognition for our capabilities and our technology. There's a revolution that's happening all around us in the field of computing. It's called cloud computing, and cloud computing traces back to the capability to take physical computers and abstract all the essence of their processing and put them into software containers called virtual machines and have many of these virtual machines running on one physical computer. Each of these virtual machines has its own operating system running quite independently and logically disconnected from all the others. But through this miracle of virtualization, I'm able to take one physical box and run 20 computers upon it, 20 of these virtual machines. What Data Gardens developed is the capability of moving these virtual machines while they are still running over large geographic distances. This is something that many, many companies have wanted to do for a long, long time, and we were the first to succeed at it. Through this innovation, we were fortunate to be recognized in 2009 as the #1 startup in the virtualization sector in the world in 2009 by Virtualization Congress, selected by IDC as one of the top 10 cloud computing companies to watch this year, and similarly by several other awards, including top technology awards at IEEE Grid and Open Grid Forum. I say all of this not to boast or in any way try to claim some special status, but to point out we feel that, like a lot of companies, we have excellent technology, and yet we still are very severely challenged as we struggle to commercialize that technology. Canada has many powerful programs, IRAP notably, that help companies like ours develop these incredible technologies. And yet there's tremendous challenges that we confront in finding the capital, the management resources to successfully commercialize those. Particularly in Western Canada, we feel that most companies like us are poorly capitalized, have excellent technology, yes, poorly capitalized, some weaknesses in sales and marketing. And we have a huge challenge in confronting what I call the commercialization gap, what the CICP also calls the commercialization gap, of proceeding from an early stage pilot capability or beta capability and pushing that forward into the market as a game-changing product. And I feel that CICP is one of the most important initiatives that I've seen, if not the most important initiative I've seen come out of the federal government for helping companies like ours address this commercialization gap. It is critically important for a number of reasons. The benefits that we have received, actually maybe before I get to the benefits, I should tell you a little bit about the division of the federal government that found a desire and a need to adopt our capabilities. This ability of moving live virtual machines, powerful though it may be in principle, what's the use case? What's the application? Why do companies want this? One of the most important applications for it is the ability to provide non-disruptive disaster recovery protection for a business. If my business goes down, or my data center goes down, I'd like to have the capability to evacuate all my live virtual machines to a remote location, keep them running without any interruption in service whatsoever. And that's the capability that we offer, which we believe is quite disruptive in the industry. We were fortunate enough that the CTO's Office of Public Works recognized that uniqueness of our capability and selected us as one of the technologies they would like to deploy. They had 3 use cases for us. Public Works now, as Shared Services Canada, has a challenge of taking over 300 data centers and consolidating them down to about 20 to achieve efficiencies of operation to avoid some of the excess expense that we as Canadian taxpayers are bearing. So the opportunity to use our product to live migrate virtual machines, to move an entire data center from one site to another without anyone noticing any interruption in service whatsoever, that's a tremendous capability for the federal government to have. And for that capability to be exposed just through software that can be deployed by their engineers in a very facile fashion, to moving without any need for engineers to actually go on site, that's a tremendous capability. That's use case 1, consolidating data centers. The second use case was to provide disaster recovery protection, or what's also called business continuity protection, to all the divisions served by Shared Services Canada as a service, business continuity as a service, a revenue-generating center for Shared Services Canada, while providing this protection service, data protection service, to the divisions of the federal government. The third use case was for Shared Services Canada to use our product for their own internal data protection. And we have gone through extensive testing now with Shared Services Canada. We're now launching on a phase of an actual production deployment with one of the divisions served by Shared Services Canada, and we're very excited about that development. Now, with that background, I'd like to just take what time is left, a couple of minutes, I hope, to tell you about the benefits that we have received from participation in the CICP program. First, to put it in the most blunt fashion possible, revenue. $500,000 of revenue, as we received, is vital to an organization of our size. But looking beyond the obvious, a customer reference is critical. Customer reference, we are now working with some of the largest managed service providers or cloud providers in the world, multi-billion-dollar organizations. And then naturally they look for customer references. Who's deployed your product before? The fact that Shared Services Canada is a customer is a very, very important reference point for us. Customer feedback help to improve our product. We've received tremendous help from Shared Services Canada as we've struggled to improve our product to better meet their needs and the needs of other cloud providers. Follow-on sales opportunities. We hope to secure additional sales to Shared Services Canada over the coming year. We expect that Shared Services Canada will influence other government departments that aren't served by Shared Services Canada to look favorably upon our product. We also have received help from Shared Services Canada in help to secure financing for our company and new channel and strategic partners. So the tremendous benefits. In terms of shortcomings of the program, none that has affected us directly. Would point out that there are a significant overhead for companies in going through the due diligence to determine whether they will be accepted into the program. That's a risk factor for a lot of companies. There's a lot of effort involved in it, but it's something that we are very much appreciative that we went through. So I'd like to summarize by saying that CICP has been a vital component in our corporation's growth, and we would like to see the program expanded in the future.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hayward, for a very interesting presentation. You're very well represented here in the room. Actually, there's 4 large monitors, and your face is on all 4 of them. So
okay. Thank you very much.
So your message is very well received. It's like a cloud, one of my colleagues says. Okay. We're going to go to questioning then by committee members, and first, on behalf of the NDP, Matthew Rabinet.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. D'abord, Thank you, Mr. Chair, and first of all, thanks to the witnesses for being there and for sharing their experience with us, their experience with Public Works.
Now, as a member of the opposition, what concerns me is that this program it should give good information to applicants, to companies. So I'll ask you this question. The Assistant Deputy Mr. Pablo Sobrino, who explained to us that the evaluation for the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program had 2 steps: to ensure that each application met the mandatory criteria. So that was the first step. And the second step was to review the level of innovation of the application. So as far as these 2 steps are concerned, I am wondering whether the quality of information you received from the office, whether it was good.
Yes. Here for a second. What I would say is that our company is experienced mostly through previous lifestyles of people that are in it, of dealing with government procurement, and to pick out the essential information out of calls for proposals. So what we saw in the criteria that was published is it was very easy for us to make an assessment quickly whether or not we qualified for the program or not, and what our chances of success would be. We had, I would say, roughly 7 days from the time we were aware of the program to the finalization of the call for proposals. So we had to do that very quickly, and within the first hour or so, we knew that we were qualified. So I think, from that perspective, we did get sufficient information to see whether we fit or not, and whether we had a chance of being successful.
I don't know if Mr. Hayward would like to add a few words.
I thought the selection criteria were very clearly spelled out. I was pleased to see that it was obviously a very fair program. Sometimes there's a downside to that they are totally inflexible on deadlines, but I appreciate overall the fact that this program was very fair, and obviously so. There were some challenges in the actual submission process. We were part of the first submission process, and I think true to the whole spirit of CICP, they were trying to innovate by using a new company to prepare the online application process. And there were some hiccups with that, frankly, but I think they've worked their way through that now, and I think the program is working very well.
D'accord. Thank you. My next question is this. In your view, does the CICP provide a good definition for the word innovation? And if not, how would you change it, or would you have any suggestions to improve the definition of the word innovation?
CICP program is that they tagged innovation to the technology readiness scale, which is something that we commonly use even within our own company to determine whether technology is ready for commercialization or not. So it was very clear where it tagged. The improvement, I would say, though, is that there was it's almost a catch-22, is that to be really successful, you had to have a product that was ready for commercializing, but you couldn't have sold it yet. Companies arrive at that blessed period for hopefully the minimum period of time. So what I would suggest is an improvement to the thing is that the concept of an innovation should also include products that maybe have had a few customers, not very many, because for that first 3 years of a new product's life cycle, there's intense reworking of the product. And I don't think that because you've sold one thing to somebody that should disqualify you from this program.
Yes, I would agree with that observation. I'm sorry. Yeah, I would agree with that observation. My understanding is that the rules are a little bit more lax now. Maybe we should go back and talk to the people who run the program, but my understanding is that you can have had a few products into the market, so there is a little bit of latitude there now. But I would be fully in agreement that it was clear from the outset that this had to be a very, very innovative product, and it had to be also at the stage of a pilot trial.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Thank you, Mr. Ravenette. Your time has expired. Next for the Conservatives, Mr. Ron Kanan.
Chair, and thanks to our witnesses and Captain Patterson. We had a chance to briefly chat before the meeting, and as I mentioned, I represent an area, the Okanagan Kelowna Lake Country. You said you have an office in Victoria as well as in St. John's, so you covered coast to coast in that respect, and commend you for your innovation and your company's continued creativity to use that technology to help oil and gas and exploration off the coast. Just wanted to, if you could clarify, one of your opening statement, you commented you got screened out on the risk assessment criteria. Maybe you could expand a little bit what exactly happened and your recommendations, how we can maybe, as the focus of this committee is we're looking at the small business office and trying to see if how we can make OSME and the CICP program more flexible and adaptable to utilize those Canadian technologies. So maybe expand on your experience a little more, please.
Okay. The best example would be something that actually happened in the course of this year, is that we were not screened out of CICP, but we were screened out of an opportunity with the Canadian Commercial Corporation to sell a similar type of product to a foreign government. At the same time, we were accepted by ExxonMobil as a supplier for essentially the same technology within their procurement system, and as well by a major defense contractor in Germany to supply the German Navy. So what I saw was that for essentially the same technology, same company, same financial status, is that we were good for the super majors, but we weren't good enough for the Canadian Commercial Corporation. Speaking with the Canadian Commercial Corporation, it's basically that their rules are such that new technologies and new companies are very difficult for them to deal with because of high risk factors. And I think something like the CICP can bridge that gap to a certain degree because it seems to have a lower threshold, let's say, than CCC for accepting companies.
Well, I appreciate it. I think it's a good nugget that we could include on our report to take back to make sure that we do all we can to help encourage and support those innovative ideas in Canada. To Mr. Hayward in Edmonton, I believe you said you are, and born and raised there, and moved out west once got 35 below weather, so hopefully you still haven't got your snow coming there yet. But I have a lot of good friends in Alberta. You know, they've got the tech park there and done some great things. And I applaud you on your few short years and what you've been able to accomplish with your company. I just wanted to know, I mentioned to Mr. Patterson about buy and sell as a government website. Are you familiar with that website?
Yes, yeah.
Because my question, and we've had this, as the chair had mentioned, this committee has been going on for a few weeks, and some of the witnesses had no idea, had never heard of this, you know, the CICP or the buy and sell website. So I'd like to ask both of you, where did you find out about CICP and the buy and sell website?
I did not know about the buy and sell website before my experience with CICP. I think the first, I think a colleague introduced me to the CICP program. Actually, it was another company, now that I recall, that was making an application. We weren't directly aware, we hadn't received any notification about it, but another company that was applying let us know, and we thought there was still time left, so we did apply. And through the application process, became aware of the buy and sell government site.
Yeah, our experience is very similar. We found out through an industry association that we're part of in Newfoundland, the Oceans Advance, that this call for proposals had come through, and then going onto the buy and sell, we became more aware of the website there. We're very familiar with Merck's, for instance, but not that other website.
The Canadian Federation of Independent Business, for example, very few of the percentage of their members were aware of it, so I appreciate that. We'll continue to pound the message and do all we can to get it out. One last question before my time runs out. Mr. Hayward, you mentioned capitalization is a big challenge. Is that in your specific industry, or is that as a new startup company, and have you had worked with venture capital and the angel investors?
Yes, I think we have been working with angel investors and venture capital firms and have had significant interest from them. I do think that in Western Canada, particularly in Alberta, there is a challenge that a lot of the capital is naturally directed to the energy sector. There's a shortage of companies like us and the financing for companies like us. In many ways, I think the venture capital industry out here for the information technology sector is in need of a lot of work. There's a real shortage of venture capital, I believe, out here. We have a lot easier time looking for capital in Silicon Valley than we do in our own backyard.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Thank you, Mr. Cannon. That's the end of your time. For the official opposition, Denis Blanchette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for our two witnesses for being here today. My question is for Mr. Hayward. Now, when you talk about consolidating data centers or consolidation, this is nothing new, but you had innovative solutions, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your experience. When you applied under this program, how were you able to show that you really had an innovative solution which fit the criteria of the program?
Well, we were fortunate to have received a lot of international recognition for our technology. There was a lot of independent validation points, if you will. We had won awards at international technical conferences and been selected as one of the top 10 ICT companies in Canada a few times in a row. So there were a number of independent validation points. We'd also been successful in winning some important grants for our technology development. So I think there were some independent benchmarks there that would help the evaluators. In terms of the capability that makes this special when you're talking about consolidating data centers, traditional methods are to shut down all the servers in one site, physically move them to another site, or do data transfers, file transfers that lead to a lot of downtime. Our technology allows those data centers to be moved without any interruption in service at all. And that capability is new.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Now, in your presentations, you told us that you worked with Public Services Canada and you also worked with Shared Services Canada. Now, I would like to know, because you worked with these two distinct organizations, how was it for you to work with each of these organizations based on the same project?
Because we were the ones, I think, that had the primary interaction with Shared Services Canada. I think there's an important transition going on right now from Public Works to Shared Services Canada. We have the sense that there's still a lot of uncertainty in how that will all shake out. But our experience has been pretty good through that transition. The people that we worked with before we're continuing to work with now and are directly responsible for service delivery, the cloud services, if you will, for Shared Services Canada. So we have not been directly affected by the transition, though I know it's very disruptive to many divisions of government.
Okay. Monsieur Patterson, j'aimerais que vous...
Mr. Patterson, I would like you to tell us a little bit about your relationship with the government. How did you adapt to working with the federal government when the time came for you to implement your innovation?
In our development cycle, we've had an awful lot of interaction with the federal government, including Coast Guard and the Navy, through the prototyping process. So we were all very familiar with how the federal government works, and with the people on the ground, there's absolutely no problem. Like I said before, the main issue that we run into when we're dealing with the federal government is through the procurement process. And it's not because we don't have good technology or we're not, an intelligent company. It's just that we're small with new technologies. That's normally where, our only source of friction is with the federal government. But every operational person or research person that's employed by the federal government has been very good and easy to work with.
Vous êtes satisfait de la relation?
So you're generally happy with the relationship you had with the government?
The Research Council is one of the license holders for the technology that we exploit. One thing that we have seen, though, is that the ability of the National Research Council to keep the flywheel of innovation going is starting to slow down. That's about the only thing I would note in the day-to-day relationships that we have that is something that we're looking at with a little bit of concern.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Patterson.
That concludes your time, Mr. Blanchette. Thank you very much. Next, we have Mr. Jacques Gourde for the Conservative side. Jacques.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here this afternoon, you, Mr. Patterson, and you, Mr. Hayward, as well, via modern technology. A little earlier, you said that you became aware of the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program either by the website or through friends. Did you find you needed the help of another federal organization to fill in the formulas, or were you able to do all of this on your own?
Point of view is we've had experience in working with the federal government before, mostly through their innovation programs. So we have a good idea on how to interpret what's being asked for and how to submit a compliant bid. So we were able to do this on our own. And as I said in my opening remarks, I actually view this as one of the strengths of the program, is that there was no real shortcuts in the application process. I think if a company has aspirations of supplying the federal government, and this is their first time doing it, it's very important that they learn the ins and outs of how it's actually done.
Yes, we filed our submission ourselves. There was no, we didn't seek any external help.
Bon, je suis bien heureux de vous.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that, because implementing programs and having interpreters go through the process on their own, well, this means that the program is accessible and user-friendly. Now, you said that this program made a difference for both of you, that it met a need for you as far as financing was concerned, regardless of what stage the company was at. Now, can you give us more concrete examples as to why this program is so important for companies like yours?
From our perspective is that we already service the oil and gas industry, so we have a well-known reputation in oil and gas. To break into the defense and security market, especially on export, if a Canadian company cannot sell their own products, which the Canadian government helped to develop, back to the Canadian government, this is viewed by foreign buyers that there's something fundamentally wrong with either the company or the technology. So having a reference client or having an example where the Canadian government has actually bought the technology that they sponsored the development of helps prove that VMT is actually a well-run and honest company. Without being able to do that, the rest of the world doesn't interpret this non-procurement of Canadian technology by the Canadian government through our eyes. They look at it through their eyes. And in their eyes, this would be something that would be because there's something wrong with us. So it's crucial. If we can't supply the Canadian government with stuff that they've helped to develop, we don't have much of a hope to sell it to anybody else.
I could provide an example from this week, perhaps going on right now. Forrester Research, a major industry analyst organization in our sector that has global influence in terms of identifying key technologies that are disruptive, We had a detailed interview with a woman who was part of Forrester Research. She was just identifying the top new data protection technologies that she's writing a report upon these companies. Normally, we have to pay $40,000 or $50,000 to be mentioned in such a report. She was very, very impressed by our product demonstration we gave her through the internet, and she asked for customer reference so that we could be included in her report. I gave them the contact name of the individual who we've been working with at Shared Services Canada, actually the CTO, Jurka Danek, and my belief is that he will provide us a very good reference, and that will help us be mentioned in the Forrester report and get all the corresponding media attention.
Well, thank you very much for your responses. They are very relevant, and I salute your leadership, and we're very pleased to hear witnesses like you from Canadian companies who are successful, who perform well. So it's a real pleasure to have you here, and congratulations for all you've achieved so far.
I would like to now welcome member for the Liberal Party, substituting into the committee, Sean Casey from Charlottetown. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am not, have never been, and will never be the chief economist for the Royal Bank, but I'll do my best. In 5 minutes or less, it'll all be over. And I'm going to apologize off the top, Captain Patterson. You mentioned in your opening remarks about being screened out due to risk assessment, and I realize you've already asked a question on it, but I'm still not clear. When you answered the question about being screened out due to risk assessment, I think what I heard is that it isn't in relation to the CICP program, but to something else. Yeah, that's correct. For the CICP program, we were accepted. This was a parallel activity that was going on through CCC, the Canadian Commercial Corporation, to accept us as a supplier, which the Canadian government then would do a government-to-government transaction with a foreign government.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Another thing that you said in the course of your opening remarks was that if your proposal, and excuse me if my wording is clumsy, that if your proposal is improperly structured, it may preclude you from participating at a later date. Did I understand it correctly?
Yeah, this came from the briefings that were given to the bidders in round one, and it comes from the principle that if a consultant helps the federal government define their the performance standards or the specifications for an object, that group then is barred from bidding and supplying the same object. So where this runs into, in our case, we already had something that was completely developed and fully defined. But if you had something that was earlier stage and you were using this as a prototyping opportunity, and from the prototyping opportunity, the federal government was going to define the specifications for something they would ultimately buy, is that you could end up being viewed as the consultant who developed the spec for them and therefore not be able to supply them.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Hayward, you had indicated, and I think I saw it in your deck there as well, you made reference to the significant overhead in going through the due diligence process, and I'm just trying to find a benchmark here. Perhaps you could help me with that in terms of comparing the due diligence that you would do, that you would undertake for participation in this program with something that you might do with another level of government, with the private sector, with even another federal government program like the SHRED program or something like that. Can you give me some point of reference in terms of the due diligence in this program compared to something else?
Sure. I can compare it against the SHRED program. Vastly more due diligence required than for the SHRED program. Vastly more. Compared to IRAP, I would say considerably more than IRAP, but the same league. One of the reasons I found it challenging, and maybe different companies will have had a different experience, is that each of the sections requires a specific number of words, 150 words or 200 words, to tell me about this aspect of your technology. Multiply that by 40 or 50 fields that all need to be filled out, and it becomes like writing an epic poem in 200-word stanzas. It's a little challenging and time-consuming. Having said that, I don't really think of this as a major issue. I think as a taxpayer, I want to hold the government accountable that they are doing their best to find the best companies. And I don't think the effort that was required of me was excessive. Time-consuming, yes, a risk factor, but it's ultimately up to the companies to make the decision whether or not they want to take that risk.
I take it from your answer that you have had occasion to participate in the SHRED program in the past. Any comment you can offer with respect to the effectiveness and the efficacy of this particular program vis-a-vis the SHRED program?
A very important difference between this and the SHRED program, a vital difference actually when it comes to raising financing for a company like ours, is that this is revenue. This is revenue. And investors evaluate companies based on revenue, whereas SHRED is a tax return. So here's a customer, here's customer feedback, customer reference, and revenue. It's very, very, very different.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. That concludes your 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Next, for the Conservative, Scott Armstrong.
Well, thank you both for being here. I'm going to start with Captain Patterson. I read that your company was established in 2004. When did you engage the CICP program? When did you start a relationship with them?
Okay, yeah. So the CICP, the first round was announced last year in late 2010. So that's when we established our link was with them.
Before you engaged in that program, had you tried to engage the security departments of the Canadian government, DND, other ones, Coast Guard, to try to sell some of your products too?
Yes, actually, our products are the things that we have for them are crossover from oil and gas. So we perfect it in oil and gas, and then we bring it over to defense and security. We've been actively pursuing both departments since 2007, and not with no success really. Yeah.
Right. So, but now you've engaged in this program, and do you view this program as a way for your company to actually break into the federal government, particularly those two departments, so that way you can get this reference client to start selling internationally? Is this a big breakthrough for you to be engaged in this program?
It's a big breakthrough, but I'm not sure if it's going to be the big breakthrough to supplying the Canadian government, because again, this is a one-shot deal. Is that they can't use this procurement vehicle to buy multiples of the same product. They have to go back through the normal procurement process, which then puts you back to the same problem. Is that we're a new company with new technology, and you don't hit the thresholds for risk tolerance. Where the breakthrough for us will be is that this will help us sell to other places. And by getting those reference clients, and then 5 or 10 years later, we can come back and sell here.
Does the recent announcement of federal investment in shipbuilding, both in British Columbia and in Nova Scotia at the Irving Shipyard, does that show a commitment by this government to shipbuilding, and would that in end possibly help your company sometime down the road?
Yeah, I mean the key for that is the shipbuilding is these are enormous procurements, fairly complicated. The key for us is to get into the supply chains of the major contractors, which we have been able to do through the Halifax class modernization, not for our products, but for our services. And we see that our excellent performance on the Halifax class modernization project is going to stand us in good stead for getting a seat at the table, so to speak, at the shipbuilding procurement process.
How many employees do you currently have?
Yeah, we have 20 full-time and about 40 virtual employees. Plus, we have about 20 associated researchers at the university who help us develop new technologies.
So it's terrific. So it's kind of an evolving market you're breaking into. So I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayward, your product that you're working with Shared Services Canada with, can you describe some of the services you're providing the federal government at this time?
Yes, our software is, like as I was mentioning, provides the capability of moving these virtual machines while still running between sites. And this capability is very important, particularly for Shared Services Canada as they evolve into what I would call a cloud provider. They're providing information technology services to many different government divisions in a consolidated, centralized fashion, or trying to centralize much more than they have been in the past. And so the capability of, from the point of view of reducing the number of data centers they have as a one-time operation, the ability to move servers between sites without any interruption of service is important. But looking for the longer term, the real value is to protect those regional data centers, ensure that they can continue to operate, provide services locally, and still have centralized protection in Ottawa for all of their data. So if anything goes wrong, there will be no data loss as a result. So those are the major applications of the product.
So the upgrading by that department to more modernize their technology and modernize their data storage and their data transfer systems, that's provided you an advantage because you have a product that meets those demands?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Does your product, you talked about data storage and data mobility. Does your product actually protect data?
Yes. What it's doing is it keeps a replica of the data in a remote location. And when I want to move servers from one site to another, what I'm doing is really changing the one of those replicas is active and the other is passive and hidden. And when I want to change from one site to another, move the servers and have everyone believe that it moved from one location to another, all I'm doing is exposing the hidden replica and hiding the original one. And so in this fashion, I don't actually have to transmit all the data across the network. You could think of it as a very sophisticated shell game.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Actually, Scott, I'm afraid you're well over your time. Thank you very much, Mr. Hayward. That concludes our first round of questioning, and we'll go right into our second round. And for the NDP, Yves Peclet.
Merci. Monsieur le Président.
Thank you much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for our witnesses for being with us this afternoon. Mr. Patterson, in your presentation, you said that it was difficult to obtain a contract with the federal government, and Mr. Hayward, you said there was a struggle
to do it. Alors, j'aimerais simplement que...
Now, as far as the federal government's website is concerned, it says that there is federal help for SMEs to apply for federal contracts. So I would like each witness to talk about the impact of the potential impact of a free trade agreement with the European Union. This means that European companies will be able to submit proposals for public services or government contracts here in Canada. So what is the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises going to do to compensate for the European competition, and what impact do you think European competition will have on Canadian companies such as yours?
Oil and gas experience, because our main competitors are all Europeans and we beat them. So if they want to come to Canada, we'll beat them here. The issue, though, is a small company against a big company in a procurement system which is, I think, heavily favors a bigger company because lower risk factors. I think that if we're going to let the smaller companies flourish in bringing new technologies to market in Canada, there has to be a way, like the CICP program or some other mechanism, where you can offset some of the risk that some of these procurement or these departments will take in taking a risk in dealing with a smaller company. But head to head, technology to technology, person to person, we can beat the Europeans.
I almost want to echo every single word that the captain just spoke there. I'm not so worried about the Europeans, but it is a challenge competing against some of these enormous companies that have many representatives already embedded within the federal government that have established relationships. I take it as a given that my technology or product not only has to be better, it has to be drastically better than the products that are available from these large companies, or we have absolutely no chance at all. We must prove that we're vastly better than the products available from the large companies. But these companies are all multinational, whether they're European or it doesn't really matter.
Mais en fait, justement, ma question concernait...
My next question regards SMEs. On Tuesday, one of our witnesses said that 43% of SMEs had put in proposals for government contracts. Do you think small and medium-sized businesses will be able to compete once the European Free Trade Agreement is signed? Because of course, the government awards contracts to the lowest bidder, and so in this new environment, are SMEs going to be able to compete?
Economies of scale for big companies versus small companies. Where the larger companies can have an advantage is if there's layers upon layers of due diligence, risk, bonds, whatever, just added on top of contracts, or you bundle a bunch of smaller contracts into one super contract. That is a huge disadvantage for smaller players. They just can't get in there. Even if their technology for a piece of it is better, just to address all of the issues, they just can't do. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the challenge is that a lot of the RFPs are designed with the capabilities of the larger companies in mind. And again, yeah, it's very challenging for a little company to break in.
About 30 seconds, Yves. About 10 seconds now. I'm afraid you're out of time. Thank you very much, Yves. I appreciate that. Bernard Trottier, 5 minutes, please, Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for coming in. Just recently, there was a report that came out. You may or may not have had the opportunity to read it. It's called Innovation Canada, Call to Action, otherwise known as the Jenkins Report. And it talks about innovation and research in Canada. And one of the things they talk about is the CICP program, and kind of echoing some of the things you talked about, where I think you both had very positive things to say about CICP. It's an effective way to improve commercialization, and it helps get Canadian SMEs to the next level. And I guess you concur with the general statement in the report, and maybe you could affirm that, that you'd like to see the CICP continued and perhaps expanded. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but because my just sort of did. Yeah. In terms of the demand pull measures, can you talk about, though, maybe parts of CICP that need to be expanded more, and maybe there's parts of CICP that don't need to be expanded as much? If you thought about the program holistically, I know you've had some limited exposure to it, but could you give us some feedback on CICP, where you'd like to see it expanded?
The CICP program itself, I think this idea of being able to do follow-on contracts for successful demonstrations, I think that would be a very good expansion to put in. The second one is not really related to CICP. It's related to export. On our side, we're going to make the money on the export to other countries. You have the Canadian Commercial Corporation as an excellent vehicle to do that sort of thing. So it may not be exactly a CICP-like thing, but maybe there's, like, if you can call it, like an insurance policy for CCC that they could draw upon and take a risk with smaller companies with new technologies, and and then they can help us bring us to the foreign markets. I think those two things would be the things I would vote for.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hayward?
I'm at a little bit of a loss because, to be honest, we're at a critical stage We have completed successfully the testing, phase 1 and phase 2 testing. We're about to start a commercial deployment, or you would say a production deployment of our product with Shared Services Canada. If that goes well, we believe there will be follow-on business. And so it may be that we have managed to traverse that very difficult chasm that separates a small business from opportunities within the federal government. We don't know yet. So at this point, I would say that CICP has given us an enormously important helping hand, and we hope that no further helping hands are necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Maybe expanding a bit. So you have products, but usually in the wake of products that you've developed comes a variety of services. Could you maybe describe your companies in terms of how much of your revenue is services versus product? And it could be, in your case, software is considered a product?
Sure. Okay, the company survived from our starting days until the middle of this year on services. That was 99% of our revenues were services. We were in an intense R&D phase to take our IP and productize it. This year has been the crossover year primarily through sales to the offshore oil and gas industry, where now product sales are surpassing our services sales. But in our early history, it was absolutely services.
What about you, Mr. Hayward?
Primarily product. I would say 80-90% product.
Because in talking to Captain Patterson, you mentioned how St. John's, where your company is based, is becoming this, I guess, fountainhead of talent, and you're able to export your talent around the world and going to other markets and providing that service and expertise. Are there certain elements of CICP that allow you to kind of export that talent on a certain, kind of that services basis to go out there and conquer those markets?
I'll be honest with you, is that the St. John's is at its crossroads because of the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry is more likely to take a chance with new technologies, new products, and they're a global industry. So that is the launch pad where most Newfoundland companies are moving. They prove themselves in oil and gas, and then they cross over into the harder market, which is the government market. You have to have a lot of intestinal fortitude to go into government procurement.
And deep pockets.
Yep.
Okay, time. Mr. Hayward, did you want to have anything to add to that?
Not much. From services, they're not as important for us, and nevertheless, we do believe that we've gained a lot of expertise through the collaboration with SSC, our Shared Services Canada, some very talented people there, and we've benefited from those collaborations.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. For the New Democratic Party, Denis Blanchette or Matthew, which you're going to split your time, I understand.
Yeah, that's right. So, I share your worry about, I guess, what you were referring to as kind of institutionalized large suppliers that that seem to have an advantage with government procurement. And I'm trying to understand why that is. I mean, there's a lot of factors, but OSME, for example, defines a small and medium-sized business as 500 employees and less, and doesn't take into consideration, numbers of business or, the shift d'affaires profit and so forth. So I was wondering if both of you might be able to share your thoughts on what an ideal kind of definition would be for the federal government to be using.
Okay. In some other places, they talk about micro businesses, which are like in the 20 or less, right? And I think when you're looking at brand new products that are coming out, that's generally where they are, is in that really small industry. They either got to make it or they fail, and it's a really short life cycle for those folks. I would say that there probably needs to be a special definition around that type of group. Because, as Jeff had mentioned, is that obtaining capital in this country is almost impossible. So if you have revenues coming from government procurement, which is kind of targeted at these really small companies with new things, I think that would help those companies kind of bridge that gap and attract capital after they're successful.
Nothing to add from me. No.
Monsieur Patterson,
Mr. Patterson, at a certain point, you said that you would like the program to be accessible to people who had sold just a few units of any given innovative product. And so, in my mind, this means that you have needs which go beyond the pre-commercialization of a product. So what would your recommendations be, yours and Mr. Hayward's, with regard to improving the program and to help our small and medium-sized companies commercialize their innovations?
I think this is critical, is that there's a lot of program support, whether it's SHRED or IRAP or whatever, to bring you up to the end of the prototyping stage. That's not where the problem is. It's getting getting those prototypes into products takes about 3 years of experience in the, out in the marketplace with a few crazy customers who are going to take a chance on you. I think that the CICP has got to recognize that just because you've sold a couple of units to somebody doesn't mean that you're finished your development work. You've got an awful lot of work and investment left to go before you can say you've got a final product. So I would say open the gate bigger. In the oil and gas side, it would be technology readiness level 6. I'm not sure what that is in the NASA scale, but it's just that one step, right?
So there's two directions one might be inclined to go. One might be to continue the helping hand a little bit further down the path. And that means once you've done this pilot, you've gone through this pilot program and you've established that you've had a successful pilot, to have some assistance in moving to the next step in the procurement and entering the mainstream of the procurement program. And I'm certainly not going to argue that that's not needed. No doubt it is needed. I would put a lot of emphasis, though, on trying to equalize the playing field. I don't think I particularly am looking for an unfair advantage. I do want a level playing field, though. And I feel that we don't have one right now in terms, if you look at the procurement process and getting registered for procurement opportunities with the federal government, there's all sorts of financial risk assessments, there's all sorts of there's steps that we need to go through which filter us out, and understanding that financial risk is a natural thing for the federal government to examine. I would invite you to examine ways to try and equalize the playing field so that small businesses are not necessarily pre-selected out of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. That concludes the time for that round. And Conservative Party, Mike Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank our guests for coming today. And often I'm asked, who do you meet that impresses you the most? And I often answer entrepreneurs. And I want to thank you both for taking the risk and having the vision, and much more vision than I have, to be perfectly honest with you, on lots of things. It's organizations such as yours that are driving the economy and will make a difference for us in the long run. But I have a couple of questions for you. I appreciate your comments. It was mentioned about the recent report on whether we're getting bang for our buck on innovation, and it looked at IRAP, it looked at SHRED, it looked at this program, it looked at their Sustainable Technology Development Corporation. I don't know if it probably doesn't fit in either one of your organizations, but there are models that we are using to. And at the end of the day, the report said maybe we'd be better off doing more of a direct subsidy to businesses than offering tax credits, because you're not sure what you're going to get bang for the buck. My question to you two, because you're involved, and I've asked others, what do you believe the role should be for the Government of Canada in picking winners and losers in that? Or is that a problem or not? The overall concept of this report, I'm not sure you've had a chance to see it. I know you're busy doing other things, but the report basically says maybe we should be moving away from the SHREDs and the IRAPs to, particularly SHRED because it's the tax side, to a more direct subsidy such as Sustainable Technology Development, which you need a business plan. We help you we're angel investors in a sense to get you to commercialization. I know this is a one-off product or one-off program, and I want to come back to that. But how do you feel about the government of Canada being involved in picking winners and losers? And I'll start with you, Captain.
Yeah, I think you should stay away from it, to tell you the truth. I don't think subsidies are a good thing. We can all stand on our own feet, and we can compete with anyone. Now, I see that tax offsets and all this stuff to encourage innovation is good. It's going to generate revenues and employment over the long run. I think where the federal government can really help is to help remove the barriers for the technologies to be implemented, whether it's internal procurement or to help facilitate government-to-government procurements with other countries. If a company is making revenues, they can attract investment. And let the investment community take the risk of putting in the investment and let them pick the winners and losers.
Okay, Mr. Hayward, do you have a...
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything the captain said there, but I would point out that SHRED and IRAP programs, that money is tied to research and development. SHRED obviously is directly tied to R&D effort. And similarly, all the money that, the grant that you receive from IRAP is for R&D. Yet, our companies frequently have very strong technology and are missing in the sales and marketing expertise, the commercialization expertise, to bring that technology successfully to market. I don't want a subsidy, no, but I would point out that the way in which we reward innovation puts undue emphasis on just the research and development portion of innovation and not the commercialization portion of it. That's one gap that the CICP program is effectively filling. We probably have much more of a gap than they can possibly fill here. And yes, I would invite you to all consider other options than just funding straight core engineering or research and development, because it leads to companies with unequal balance, far too much technical expertise, and not enough in sales and marketing.
My second and final question is regarding my NDP colleague across the way brought up the issue of free trade. And we fundamentally disagree. My question to you as entrepreneurs, as someone who has been developing a company, knowing the size of the marketplace here in Canada, and knowing what the potential marketplace is worldwide, do you, in your business plans, your long-term business plans, have a vision for your company to be able to sell your products duty-free in other countries around the world? Or are you mostly, when you start up, because I've never started up a company, just looking at the domestic market, or you have a vision for being a world competitor, competing in world markets around the world? I appreciate your answer to that question.
Well, there's going to be two dominant simulation companies in the world, CAE and VMT. So we are looking at world domination. We have to have 95% of our revenues coming from export. It's impossible to make the money in Canada. So, in fact, we've already started export. We've got venture capital in our company because our venture capital people believe that we can be successful in export. Trade barriers are a bad thing. We're looking at this thing in the States. This is very bad because that's a potential market for us. I personally, and our business plan would fail if all the trade barriers went up and we could only sell to Canada.
Much. Mr. Hayward, anything to add?
Yeah, yes, we definitely aspire to be a global company, absolutely. Whether or not we will be is very much in the balance. One of our closest competitors, I'm going to leave the name out, but they are much less mature than we are. They don't even have a product yet. They have no revenue. We have $750,000 in revenue. And soon, very soon, we'll have more than $2 million in revenue. And yet they have been able to raise within Silicon Valley $22 million of venture funding, and we have been able to raise nothing in venture capital. And again, if you looked at the technology, ours is demonstrably superior and more mature. That is the core problem that needs to be addressed. And without financing and investment of a scale that's competitive with what you're seeing in Silicon Valley, it will be difficult for Canadian companies to become global. We will continue to exit early, as we do, for pennies on the dollar being acquired by big U.S. corporations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Sean, thank you for being so patient. It's your turn again.
All my questions have been asked and answered. I commend both of you for what you're doing and how you're developing your companies, but I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sean. Actually, I see. Well, given that a few minutes opportunity, I have two questions of my own, if the chair could take the liberty to ask two brief questions here. First of all, the two things that both of you have identified as the bundling factor and trying to compete as a small competitor to elbow your way into government procurement with such dominant large actors, and the United States Office of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise, or the counterpart, they actually have a mandate to compel government to unbundle contracts to the greatest extent possible in order to enable the greatest number of smaller entrepreneurs to get a foothold and grow their companies to be big actors someday. Our Canadian office has no such mandate to recommend to government that they do that. I mean, do you recognize, or would you recommend that there could be a secondary benefit in government procurement if it could act as facilitate more small entrepreneurs to incubate and grow and become large actors? That's my first question, the unbundling. The second is, both of you have identified venture capital as being an issue. Something that I was working with and in my past life, and we've had witnesses here representing venture capital funds whose source of money is the labor-sponsored investment funds. I know the GrowthWorks organization that Tom Hayes represented here, I believe, was one of the VenCap firms that worked with you. Is that not right, Captain Patterson?
That's correct.
I think the research shows that this is a relatively cheap way to loosen up venture capital and get it into circulation by giving the tax credit to the labor-sponsored investment funds. Could either or both of you speak to your experience, or would you recommend that as a viable source of venture capital to get it into circulation? So the unbundling and the venture capital from labor-sponsored investment funds, I'd be interested in.
Okay. I would say it'd be a good idea to unbundle, because what happens is if you don't do that, then the small companies have to try to break into the supply chains of big multinational companies. And it kind of depends on their geopolitical structuring, whether or not they're going to tolerate you coming into their supply chain. So if you can unbundle where it makes sense, it makes sense. Labor-sponsored venture capital, as you said, GrowthWorks Atlantic Venture Fund has invested in our company. The money was really good, but the better thing was it made our company much more disciplined when it comes to structuring our company and looking for additional funding. We're talking about due diligence. Someone asked questions about the due diligence on this one, is that after going through a venture capital due diligence, this one is very lightweight. But when you go through a venture capital due diligence, you learn a whole lot of things, and you've got a lot of structure in place to answer the questions with other people. So I'd say that we're in a better position to raise additional venture capital because we had GrowthWorks in, and it's just because GrowthWorks taught us so much.
And did they take an equity share in your company?
Yeah, actually that's what they do, is they buy shares in the company. They came in with an Archangel and the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and then through that, then we're going into all kinds of wild and wonderful things like mezzanine financing and so on and so forth, which we could never think of in 2007 when all this started. We were very enthusiastic and very smart people, but we just had zero track record on financing a company, and GrowthWorks brought us along.
That's very good. Do you have any views, Mr. Hayward? Do you want to share on either of those?
I'm afraid my experience is limited on both. Let me just say, with regard to the bundling and unbundling, we haven't competed on enough federal government contracts to really have a considered opinion on that. Most of the customers that we have, our go-to-market strategy is very much focused on private cloud providers, major companies like IBM and Savvis and Terramark. So we have not competed on many government contracts. As a point of principle, yes, it sounds great, but I just don't have much experience on that. Similarly, on the labor-sponsored investment funds, I'm not aware of any such funds that are available to us in Alberta or that tend to invest in Alberta. There was one based in Quebec that did a few years ago in a company called TechnoCap, but they're no longer around, and we don't have a lot of experience with them out here.
Okay. Well, I think that ends our rounds of questioning. I just want to thank both of our witnesses for taking the time to share their views with us today. Very interesting and very useful presentations, both of them. So thank you very much. I'm going to suspend the meeting briefly, and we'll reconvene for some private committee business. Thank you to our guests.
Thank you very much.
That's after.